Imagine a billionaire who thought money could buy him out of every mistake, every sin, every broken promise. But when his secret came crying into this world, with eyes that mirrored his own, his empire of lies began to crumble. Before I tell you how it all unraveled, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is a story of power, betrayal, love, and a truth so undeniable that even the richest man alive couldn't escape it. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens at the end. The story begins inside the sprawling mansion of Alexander Grant, a man whose name was carved into skyscrapers, whispered in Wall Street boardrooms, and printed on glossy magazines that hailed him as a self-made genius. The billionaire whose fortune was as vast as the oceans. But behind the shimmering chandeliers and endless marble floors, there lived a quiet woman named Mariah, a maid who had worked for the Grant family for years. She was diligent, graceful, unnoticed by most except Alexander. Their encounters had begun innocently. A glance across the dining room when she refilled his glass. A smile when he handed her his coat after a late-night gala. But soon those glances stretched into conversations, those conversations into touches, and touches into nights where the billionaire blurred the lines between master and servant. For Mariah, it was complicated. She knew he was powerful, untouchable, but she was human, vulnerable, and against her better judgment, she allowed herself to be drawn into his world of luxury and secrecy. At first, Alexander treated it like a game, a forbidden indulgence hidden behind his polished reputation. But the game shattered when Mariah discovered she was pregnant. She stood trembling in the staff quarters with the test clutched in her hand, knowing her life had changed forever. When she told Alexander, expecting at least a shred of responsibility, his reaction cut deeper than any blade. He denied it, flat out. With a smirk of arrogance, he told her she must be mistaken, that she was just looking for a payday, that she didn't belong in his world and should take care of it before anyone found out. But Mariah, with tears burning her cheeks, chose something different. She chose her baby. She walked out of his mansion that night, carrying not only a child, but a truth that could one day shatter the billionaire's empire. Months passed. And while Alexander's life glittered on the surface, champagne galas, deals worth billions, and media headlines celebrating his brilliance, Mariah struggled quietly in a small apartment on the other side of town. The glow of wealth she once glimpsed every day was gone, replaced with the dim light of a single bulb in her kitchen and the ache of swollen ankles as she carried her child alone. Yet despite the hardships, she felt strength she never knew she had. The baby inside her gave her courage, a sense of purpose. She found work at a local diner, her belly growing as she wiped tables and carried plates, her heart carrying both fear and defiance. Gossip swirled among the other staff, some whispering she was crazy to raise the child, others warning her that Alexander Grant would never let her near his world again. Meanwhile, Alexander convinced himself the problem had vanished. He drowned his denial in luxury, telling himself she was just a maid, insignificant, easily forgotten. But behind his cold exterior, cracks were forming. There were nights when he lay awake in his penthouse, haunted by the memory of her eyes, and the possibility that somewhere out there was a child carrying his blood. He shoved the thought away, focusing instead on expanding his empire, but destiny had its own plan. When the baby was born, Mariah named him Elijah. From the moment she looked into his tiny face, she knew. He had Alexander's sharp jawline, his skin tone a beautiful blend of them both, and most strikingly, his eyes. They were the same piercing steel-grey eyes that Alexander saw every morning in the mirror. The resemblance was undeniable, haunting. Mariah wept as she held him, both in love and in pain, because she knew the truth that Alexander refused to accept was now living, breathing, undeniable. Years passed, and little Elijah grew into a boy whose laughter filled the tiny apartment with warmth that money could never buy. And while Mariah struggled from dawn to dusk with 2 jobs to keep food on the table and shoes on her son's feet, she carried her hardships like armor, never letting Elijah feel the weight of the battles she fought every day. But destiny has a way of weaving paths together. And it happened one afternoon inside the crowded diner where Mariah worked tirelessly as a waitress. Alexander Grant, the billionaire who had once turned his back on her, strolled in with a group of high-profile investors, wearing his signature suit and that air of arrogance that always made him stand taller than everyone else, never imagining that his buried past was about to confront him face to face. And as Mariah balanced a tray of plates with trembling hands, her heart skipped when her son, waiting quietly in the corner booth with his school bag, lifted his head and locked eyes with the powerful man across the room. And in that instant, time stopped, conversations faded, and Alexander's world shattered because staring back at him were those same piercing grey eyes he had seen in the mirror every morning of his life. Eyes he could not deny, eyes that told the truth louder than any DNA test ever could. And before he could compose himself, his glass slipped from his hand and crashed against the floor. His investors startled while he stood frozen, staring at a boy whose face carried his own reflection. He said nothing that day, simply fled the diner in silence. But inside his chest, thunder roared because every lie he had told himself, every cruel word he had thrown at Mariah, every denial he had hidden behind his billions came rushing back to choke him. And for nights afterward he could not sleep, haunted by the image of Elijah's eyes piercing through the armor of denial he had built for years. Until finally, his obsession grew so heavy that he hired private investigators to follow Mariah and the child, gathering photos and reports, each one a painful mirror of the truth he could no longer escape. And with every page he read, every picture of Elijah smiling, running, playing, laughing, his guilt deepened into a wound he could no longer ignore, because the billionaire who once believed he was untouchable was now brought to his knees by the undeniable gaze of a child he could no longer pretend didn't exist. It was on a storm-drenched night when Alexander finally surrendered to the weight of his guilt and showed up at Mariah's modest apartment. The billionaire who once commanded empires now standing on her doorstep, soaked in rain, stripped of arrogance and trembling with words he had never spoken before. And when Mariah opened the door, her heart pounded with fury and disbelief, seeing the man who had once denied her, abandoned her, now begging to be let in. His voice shaking as he asked to see the boy he could no longer erase from his conscience. But Mariah's eyes burned with years of pain as she reminded him of every cruel word he had spat. Every night she had gone hungry while raising Elijah alone, every struggle he had turned his back on. And for the first time, Alexander did not fight back with money or power. He dropped to his knees on her worn-out carpet, his expensive suit clinging to him in the rain, confessing his cowardice, his fear, his shame, telling her he was wrong, that he could no longer live another day pretending his son did not exist. But Mariah's resolve was hard, her anger fierce, and she told him he had no right to walk back into their lives as if nothing had happened. Yet the moment Elijah padded into the room, rubbing his sleepy eyes and looking curiously at the man kneeling on the floor, the air shifted, because when father and son locked eyes, the truth roared louder than any words, undeniable and unbreakable. And Alexander's tears fell freely as he whispered an apology that cracked his voice. "I'm so sorry," while the boy tilted his head, hesitant yet curious, and asked the question that pierced through every wall Alexander had built. "Are you my dad?" And in that single moment, the billionaire who once denied everything felt his empire of lies crumble as he reached out with trembling hands, knowing that no amount of power, no fortune, no polished reputation could buy back the years he had lost. But perhaps, if he fought with sincerity and love, he could build something real with the fragile family before him. And though Mariah's heart was not ready to forgive, though battles would follow in courtrooms, and arguments would rage in whispers and shouts, Alexander began the slow climb toward redemption, proving not with money, but with presence that he was ready to stand as a father. And in the months that followed, though scars of betrayal lingered, Something new and fragile grew in their place. A chance, a hope, a bond. Because in Elijah's grey eyes, Alexander no longer saw just his reflection. He saw the man he could become, the redemption he had never thought possible. In the family he had almost destroyed, but now vowed to protect forever.